Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 2022 City Council meeting. Due to the continued state of emergency related to COVID-19, we're not conducting in-person meetings until further notice. We continue to offer meeting access to the public by posting meeting information and materials on the city's website at www.cityofrochester.gov/public-meetings and streaming our meetings live on City 12 TV and the City Council's YouTube and Facebook pages. I encourage anyone who has not received the COVID-19 vaccine to discuss this with their physician and to visit monroecounty.gov/health-covid-19-vaccination or vaccine, for more information. The meeting will come to order, and I ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Gruber,
Here.
Councilmember Harris,
Here.
Councilmember Lightfoot,
Present, ma'am.
Councilmember Martin,
Here.
Councilmember Patterson,
Here.
Councilmember Pio,
Here.
Councilmember Smith,
Here.
Vice President Lupian,
Present.
President Melendez.
Here.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask the council to join me in reading a proclamation in support of the Ukrainian people.
Whereas the people of Ukraine have long struggled to establish an independent state, all while preserving their culture, language, and self-identity. And whereas on August 24th, 1991, the Parliament of Ukraine formally declared an independent, democratic Ukrainian state, establishing the territorial integrity of Ukraine as independent and inviolable. And
Whereas the declaration was further upheld on December 1st, 1991, when more than 90% of Ukrainian citizens voted in a national referendum in support of independence. And whereas in August 2021, the people of Ukraine celebrated a 30-year milestone anniversary of their independence. And
whereas the sovereignty of Ukraine has been tested with unprovoked invasion from the Russian Federation. In March of 2014, the Russian Federation invaded the peninsulas of Crimea, illegally annexed the region, held a bogus referendum, claimed the territory as part of Russia, and
whereas over the years, tensions continue to escalate in the region as the Russian Federation resisted Ukraine's involvement in the European Union and NATO. And whereas on February 24th, 2022, the Russian Federation launched an unprovoked invasion of Ukraine after conducting large-scale military buildups under the guise of military exercises. And Councilmember Smith.
I'm sorry, computer issues.
I will jump in.
Thank you.
Whereas the Russian missile attacks on Ukraine's major cities has resulted in needless death and destruction. And whereas these attacks have come at the hand of a dictator whose only goal seems to be inflicting terror on a peaceful, democratic country with brutal disregard for human life and freedom. And
whereas the Rochester area is home to one of the strongest and most vibrant Ukrainian American communities in New York and the United States, with over 40,000 residents claiming Ukrainian heritage. And
Councilmember Martin.
Whereas the city of Rochester supports the safe passage and equitable migration of displaced Ukrainian citizens, residents, and refugees of all ethnicities, and will welcome and provide resources to those who immigrate to our community.
Whereas the city of Rochester stands with the leaders here in Monroe County across the globe, including in holding Russia accountable for this malicious attack on the Ukrainian people. And
now, therefore, we, Council President Miguel A. Melendez Jr., Council Vice President Mary Lupian, and Council Members Mitch Gruber, Lachey D. Harris, Willie J. Lightfoot Sr., Stanley Martin, Michael A. Patterson, Jose Pio, and Kim Smith do hereby proclaim our unwavering support for the people of Ukraine in the city of Rochester and urge our citizens to join us in supporting Ukrainians both locally and around the globe. Thank you all for joining me in reading this proclamation. I would like to ask everyone to also join me in a moment of silence as we pause, remembering the life and impact of all victims of violence, especially this month, as we recognize the challenges in Ukraine, and we remember the families and co-workers of Janet S. Jordan, a member of the city's Emergency Communications Department, an instructor in the Pathways to Public Safety program, and the colleagues and family of RPD Officer Melvin Williams. Our sincerest condolences. Thank you. Councilmember Gruber, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next, we have the approval of the minutes of the February meeting by Councilmember Lightfoot.
Yes, Mr. President, be it resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting on February 15, 2022 be approved as published in the official sheets of the proceedings.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record. The following documents are hereby directed to be received and filed. The mayor submits the following: administrative cancellation or refund of erroneous taxes and charges, February 2022. Quarterly reports, loans and grants, July through October. The following documents are hereby being directed to be received and filed. The council submits disclosure of interest forms from Councilmember Gruber on introductory number 91 and 95. Councilmember Harris on introductory number 106. Councilmember Martin on introductory number 91, and Vice President Lupien on introductory number 106.
Thank you. These documents be received and filed. It is now time for the presentation and reference of petitions and any other communications. Are there any petitions? Okay, if there are none, we will move to the reports of standing committees and action thereon. Councilmember Gruber, the Finance Committee report, please.
The Finance Committee recommends for adoption the following entitled legislation: introductory number 90, amending the 2021-22 budget to fund violence prevention services. Introductory number 91, a resolution approving an appointment to the Board of Directors of Action for a Better Community. Introductory number 116, authorizing a mandatory agreement with CipherWorks, Inc. for online employee training. And introductory number 118, authorizing an agreement with General Code LLC for indexing council proceedings. This report was respectfully submitted by Councilmember Michael Patterson, Councilmember Kimberly Smith, Council Vice President Mary Lupien, Council President Miguel Melendez, and myself, Councilmember Mitch Gruber.
Thank you, Councilmember Gruber. That report will be received, filed, and published, and we'll proceed with the vote. Introductory number 90 is legislation amending the 2021-22 budget to fund violence prevention services. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 91 is a resolution approving an appointment to the Board of Directors for Action for a Better Community. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. I believe we have some abstentions.
Yes, I'll abstain.
I think we just need to
Have to
disclose.
abstain or just disclose?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Sorry about that.
So I'm gonna disclose that I'm on the board.
Thank you.
Ditto.
Okay, so that's 9-0 then, right?
Yes.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 116 is legislation authorizing an amendatory agreement with CipherWorks, Inc. for online employee training. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. The motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 118 is legislation authorizing an agreement with General Code LLC for index and council proceedings. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. The motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Councilmember Patterson, the Neighborhood and Business Development Report, please.
Thank you, President Melendez. To the council, the Neighborhood and Business Development Committee recommends for adoption the following entitled legislation. Introductory number 92, authorizing the sale of real estate. Introductory number 93, authorizing the lease of a portion of 18 Wren Street. Introductory number 94, local law to prohibit evictions without a certificate of occupancy or good cause. The Neighborhood and Business Development Committee recommends the following entitled legislation to be held in committee. Introductory number 112, local law modifying the abatement of nuisances law with regard to cannabis offenses. This report is respectfully submitted by council members Lachey D. Harris, Kimberly Smith, Vice President Mary Lupian, President Miguel A. Melendez, and myself, Michael A. Patterson.
Thank you, Councilmember Patterson. The report will be received, filed, and published, and we'll proceed with the vote. Introductory number 92 is legislation authorizing the sale of real estate. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 93 is legislation authorizing the lease of a portion of 18 Wren Street. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. The motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 94 is a local law as amended to prohibit eviction without a certificate of occupancy or good cause.
I have a comment.
Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, so I have been trying to understand the disconnect between reducing evictions in our community and creating a pathway for people to thrive and this eviction reduction law. So I did some reading, and in our charter, under the affordable housing section, it states, the council hereby finds that there is a deficiency of such affordable housing, which deficiency is a serious detriment to the economic and social health, safety, and well-being of the residents and neighborhoods of the city. And then I went to our 2034 plan and I read this goal: to pursue additional housing strategies that support innovative and equitable housing and community development. And when we had our first public hearing on the eviction reduction law, according to my tally, we had more testimonies in favor than we had against. And I got the same tally tonight. And again, over 60% of our community residents are renters. The majority of our city's landlords are offering poor quality housing that has led to numerous health conditions causing health disparities. And according to our citywide housing market study, 30% of our city's households have the lowest median income, and those are our residents that have become targets to slumlords. So, council colleagues, we have to get this right. So whether through deeper discussion, proposed amendments, more forums, whatever. I move to table intro 94 until at least April 12th, our next council meeting.
I second that.
Okay, so I'd ask for a roll call vote on that motion.
Could you state what the motion is, what we're voting on?
Yes, it is a motion to table intro 94, the eviction reduction law, until at least April 12th, our next council meeting.
Point of clarification then is also, just to be sure, if you vote yes, then you're voting in favor of tabling the item. If you vote no, you were voting against tabling the item. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Thank you.
Would you like me to proceed with the roll call?
Yes, Madam Clerk.
Okay. Councilmember Gruber,
No.
Councilmember Harris,
No.
Councilmember Lightfoot,
No.
Councilmember Martin,
Yes.
Councilmember Patterson,
No.
Councilmember Pio,
Nope.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Vice President Lupian,
Yes.
President Melendez.
No.
The motion fell 3-6.
I also have a comment before we proceed with the vote.
Vice President Lupian.
What I have heard from opponents of this bill in the forum on Thursday and then today is a lot of fear. Fear of unintended consequences. But I submit that the consequences to our people, to our residents, have existed for some time. This housing crisis is not new and has only been exacerbated by the pandemic. And we cannot be afraid to do what is right. As someone mentioned, in times past, councils would have been on the verge of doing something innovative, and their detractors would have posed uncertainty. And they would have said that about slavery. What about the economic unintended consequences? Or workers' rights? What about the unintended consequences to those business owners? And just in our city, that is very tied to this very problem. What about the integration in school busing, the unintended consequences? We did the right thing then, and we need to do the right thing now, because we cannot afford to have more inaction, and neighborhoods like mine have more displaced renters. And we all want home ownership, but we wouldn't have said we shouldn't work on workers' rights because everyone should be an owner of a business. People are going to be renting, and we need to support them now. We can work on home ownership and path to ownership for people, and creative ownership, like cooperative ownership of multifamily properties. But we cannot leave our residents who are renting in the dark and they're in fear of not being able to have a stable place to live for their families. So I urge council to please think of our citizens, the people who live in our city, not the ones who left in the 60s and then rented out their properties to our residents and took that money out of our city. Think about the people who live here now when making your vote tonight. Thank you.
Any additional comments from council members?
I would add something, President Melendez.
Councilmember Pio.
Appreciate it. The most impactful thing that's ever happened in my life was being homeless myself about 10 years ago. It was impactful in a positive way because you would never have the person you have in front of you today without going through what I went through. The things that I had to do to change my life, my decision-making, get myself to the point where I own this house was an uphill battle. But it's not impossible. And we have the work on our city to do is to hire more code enforcement. I completely understand that people are living in unsafe housing conditions, and that's so wrong. I distinctly recall, turning on the lights to get some water in the middle of the night and cockroaches and mice running all over the place. It's disgusting. It's disturbing. I've been there. I know how it is. But that's on the city. That is on us to fix. We have to hire more code enforcement and hold people accountable to their action or inaction. That's both landlords and tenants, both who are doing wrong, if they're doing wrong. So I want to empower the people out there, and I want to empower you to know that there are some things that you can do. There are rights that you do have. Make sure you know what those rights are. The tenant association should be on top of that. If you have issues with the housing that you're in, tenant association should be on top of that. We have money for lawyers, free lawyers for you that we don't do for housing providers. But we need to hire more code enforcement, and we need to empower the people to understand that they do have rights, and we need to stand up for them with the current laws that are in place. That's it, President.
Any additional comments?
I'd like to say something.
Councilmember Martin?
So the introduction of good cause isn't something that is just happening all of a sudden, right? People in our community have been asking for this to happen. And as a resident of Rochester stated earlier, Councilmember Gruber, Councilmember Harris, and other council members have signed on to support good cause at the state level. Just like Kim, I'm struggling to understand the discrepancy between people running on a platform to provide housing to members of the community, and when people are actually in the seats, not taking the opportunity to actually provide stable, safe housing to members of our community. So it's really shocking to see that people who represent our community, people who are from this city, people who grew up here, people who know people that are being evicted right now without a good cause, are doing exactly nothing to protect members of this community. You know who you are, you know what you can do to make things better. And it is even more saddening that there has not been a counter proposal from anyone on council who has an issue with this bill as it stands. There has been nothing done to ensure that we are protecting tenants in our city. You have the opportunity to do the right thing, and judging by the vote that came just before this moment, you will choose to do the wrong thing. Your decisions have material consequences on people of our city. These are people's lives we're fighting for. These are people's lives we're talking about. So despite however you may vote today, I hope you, my colleagues, go back and ask yourself, what are you actually doing in this role to protect people in our city?
Thank you. Any additional comments from council members?
I'd like to make a comment, please.
Councilmember Gruber?
I want to start out by thanking the many tenants who have come forward to share their stories. It takes a lot of courage to speak about something as painful as eviction, and your stories have made it clear how dire the housing crisis is that we're in right now. And there's no doubt that we need to do more for tenants, especially in cities like ours with the majority of renters, rising prices, low incomes, and a challenged housing stock. There are plenty of good elements in this bill, but I want to be clear. The city of Rochester cannot implement good cause eviction protections at this time. We've heard a lot of legal opinions in the past few weeks about this law. Rochester's Corporation Counsel has provided a clear legal interpretation, but I recognize that legal aid lawyers have provided a counter. Ultimately, though, none of us need to be lawyers to assess what is going on in the city of Albany and to understand that we cannot enforce this bill. When the city of Albany passed this same bill last fall, Councilmember Lupian set up a meeting with members of our city council and Albany's Corporation Counsel office. We had a long conversation about their public process, which, by the way, was a lot more robust than the lone public hearing that was hastily planned for last Thursday. And we talked about their path forward to implementation. They acknowledged that the city of Albany was immediately sued after passing legislation and that the courts had not yet recognized good cause. We all agreed to stay in touch and keep updated. Well, here we are 5 months later, And the good cause eviction protections that were passed into law by the city of Albany have still not been applied by the courts there. There are plenty of people who spoke tonight and argued that this bill is legal and cited some of the other New York municipalities that passed the law. They passed the law. They are not implementing or enforcing the law. And I encourage you to go directly to the source. I just watched a recent hearing of the New York State Legislature with Albany Mayor Kathy Sheehan, who has been the champion of this bill at a local level. She was asked about good cause eviction protections and what the impact has been on Albany by Assemblymember Zoran Mamdani, who was helping to lead the effort to pass good cause at the state level. Mayor Sheehan acknowledged that her good cause bill has been stalled by a lawsuit that argues that the city is preempted by state law. And she implored Assemblymember Mamdani to pass good cause at the state level so her city could actually move forward with implementing this new law. I'm really disappointed that my colleagues would put forward a bill that has no hope of being enforced. Councilmember Lupien likened this to the Police Accountability Board, whereby the council decided to act in opposition to the Corporation Council because we knew it was the right thing to do at the time. Or Mr. Acuff talking about the lead law and people being scared of unintended consequences. Those comparisons don't work. This is not about unintended consequences. This is not about something that has no precedent. With the PAB, there was no precedent. But in this case, Albany has literally proven that this bill will sit in limbo for months. And perhaps more importantly, New York State is in the middle of deliberating this very bill as we speak. We're not making some righteous stand by passing legislation that we know will not be acted upon. If it were to pass tonight, it would do nothing more than disappoint people because it would not be enforceable. People look to government for answers, not for spectacle. I want to be clear once again to all the tenants who want this law to be passed. If the city of Rochester passed this bill tonight, it will not be enforceable law tomorrow. It will immediately be mired in a lawsuit, just as Albany's has been for the past 5 months. If you believe that good cause protections is critical to the city, I encourage you to call Senators Brook and Cooney and Assembly Members Bronson, Clark, Lunsford, and Meeks. New York State has the power to enforce this law, but Rochester at this time does not. In the meantime, there are plenty of things that we can do and should do immediately as a community. For one, we should get an answer from our local courts as to why they have not actually created a housing court, despite legislation by New York State last year that instructed them to do so. We should also get an answer from a local court as to why Rochester is hearing more eviction cases on a daily basis than nearby municipalities. Our court system is exacerbating the crisis that we are in, and we need to understand what's going on there and demand better. And as for our city, I'm urging us to create enforceable policies instead of engaging in political theater. Some of the solutions for Rochester are clear. We have a C of O and absentee landlord problem. We need to make sizable investments in both code enforcement and the law department so that we can take consistently problematic landlords to court and better protect tenants. And we need to ensure that Mayor Evans' Housing Quality Task Force moves quickly so that we can enact practical, enforceable laws to address our housing crisis this spring. There's a lot that we can and must do, but unfortunately, we cannot implement or enforce good cause evictions right now, which is why I will be voting no.
I have a follow-up comment to Councilmember Gruber.
Vice President Lupien.
Yeah, Councilmember Gruber, I totally understand your concerns. You know, the meeting that I set up was with Robert McGee, who actually spoke to us on Thursday and tonight. He is the Deputy Corporation Counsel of Albany, and he is the one who is telling us we do have the power to enforce good cause on a local level. And our Corporation Counsel, you know, got the misconception that the Corporation Counsel in Albany thought that this law would not withstand the legal test. However, the Corporation Counsel called our Corporation Counsel to correct that rumor, that they actually think they have a wonderful chance of beating this legislation on a local level. To your point that it has not been enacted, it absolutely has been enacted. It is enforceable in courts and it is in other cities. Some judges is rumored that they have chosen not to rule in that way, but that is not the same thing as not being legally enforceable. And as for the state battle, every local municipality that passes good cause is one more.
I believe we lost Vice President Lupian there mid-sentence.
Yeah. If you don't mind, Mr. Oh,
Can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you now.
It's one more city to push the case for a good cause on a statewide level. And it is not political theater. I really do believe that this, and I know that Councilmember Smith and Martin would agree that this would have immediate impact in our city.
President Melendez, since she was speaking to me directly, can I just respond for a moment?
For a moment, and then I know some other folks came off mute too, so I'll get to everyone.
Yeah, I understand that Deputy Corporation Counsel McGee spoke to us back then and that he came to both hearings on Thursday and Tuesday. I will certainly not get into Albany Corporation Counsel's office and figure out what's going on with why the Deputy Corporation Counsel continues to talk to us as a private citizen and not in his role as Corporation Counsel. But I will encourage you to listen to Mayor Sheehan's budget hearing with Assemblymember Mamdani, where she acknowledges that it is not being implemented currently.
Okay, Councilmember Lightfoot, I want to give you the floor because I saw you come off mute and at least give you the opportunity to react to this.
No, I just want to thank you, Mr. President, and to the council. I just want to say amen to Dr. Gruber and also to Councilmember Peel, because he said we should increase our code enforcement, double down on that. I think we should be looking at ways of using monies that we're getting in flux to us that are one-time shots. And I think it's ingenuous and unfortunate that council members would demonize other council members because they don't agree with something that they're putting forth. I think that that's disingenuous. I think it's wrong, especially for those of us who are actually working in this space with our community members and have done it for a very, very long time. The misinformation that's put to our community is sad. It really is, because unfortunately, the community hears the narratives that individuals want to put forth, and that narrative is weak. It's weak, it's disingenuous, and it's for show. And the reality and the facts are that this is illegal, period. And we can't do it, you know, and our corporate counsel has made that statement, that is public. Anyone can read that and see that. And it'll put our citizens and put our people in more of a tougher situation with the lawsuits and things that will cost this city a lot of money and the citizens a lot of money. And so the fact of the matter, and it doesn't change the situation, because if you're already having a problem of enforcing the current CFO enforcement codes, then how are you going to enforce this? And there's no plan for enforcement. So again, I'll be voting no for those reasons and reasons that my colleagues have already presented. I'm not going to keep belaboring this issue, but I agree with my colleagues who have spoken, and just say thank you for your comments. And I appreciate all of the speakers. And I've been in council for going on my 5th year, and only twice have I been given as many emails and calls. And I would have to say, I took my tally, both the public hearing and tonight, and my tally, as well as my own individual emails and phone calls. And I've had more against this than I've had on all levels, on the public hearing, tonight, and in my own personal emails, phone calls. And I'm on the streets. I'm not like many of you who you never see ever anywhere. I'm out here in the community talking to the people every day in my barbershop in this community, and they don't want this, period. So the people who elected me and those who threaten, you're not my constituents, because I'm talking to my constituents every day, and they say no to Introductory 94.
Okay, so I do not want to belabor this too much longer. I'm going to allow Councilmember Smith. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Harris.
I like to have a few comments, and I do agree with Councilmember Lightfoot and Gruber and Hale. I like to point out that, you know, we all work hard for our constituents, and, you know, I resent that Well, I wouldn't say I resent, but I just think I'm disappointed at the remarks that, there was accusatory that we don't pay attention to our constituents and we're not listening. I like to point out that in my district, neighborhood associations have spoken out and drafted letters in against Introductory 94. And I also like to point out that they've also identified the same thing that we already talked about, that code enforcement is needed. We don't have enough code enforcement and we are not enforcing the current laws that we already have. This has been the argument for some time. I would encourage administration to use the ARPA funding to start at least hiring new code enforcement. At least I know that we're going to need to get more funding to maintain it and sustain that, but we can at least start by increasing those numbers now. And then also look at some of the other things that affect housing, like sanctions. That is a county issue. We need to hold the county accountable and the state accountable for those sanction issues that causes people to go homeless. So as I like to point out, housing is a complex issue. It's not something that we're going to fix with this one piece of legislation. We need to take a holistic approach. I believe the 90-day task force is working to do that. And I'm interested to see what their findings are. So for that reason, I'm going to vote no.
Finally, Councilmember Smith, followed by Councilmember Martin, and then I'll speak last.
Yes. So first, to Councilman Lightfoot, it is unfortunate that you feel that some have demonized other council members. And I really, truly do not believe that that is the intent. As we are out in this community, in these streets, in these homes, and as we are visiting families, I mean, we just had someone who was found dead in her apartment. I mean, these issues are extremely close to home and they are painful. And so what you are hearing is hurt, hopelessness, aggravation, but certainly not the intent of demonizing. And Councilman Pale, I too have been homeless and with a child, and I've had to live in attics. And what I can tell you is a difference between me then and what is happening now is that there were many more resources in our community than there were then. And these issues have continued to exacerbate to the point where we are in a housing crisis and we cannot depend on morality to work our way out of it. We need active legislation. And then speaking about active legislation, before I became a council member, I would listen to what should be done, what can't be done. Those are very passive arguments and they are not action. And so it took a lot of courage to produce this legislation. And many of us have been fighting for this legislation on a statewide level as well, back and forth to Albany. And so it took a lot of courage and time and resources to sit and put this together. This is not political theater. This is political action. It is the way that we have chosen to sit in these seats.
Councilmember Martin.
The only thing I would like to add is just to respond directly to Councilmember Gruber. You're wrong about what's going on in Albany. The law is enacted. There's not an injunction. And also in Rochester today, there are people who are in light tech programs and affordable public housing programs who experience good cause and are thriving and have a fair chance when taken to court when it comes to eviction. So we've seen it happen in our community already. We see the impact of it, and any narratives around the constitutionality of it is just frankly nonsense. And we've seen other cities enacting this, passing this. So I'm just not buying the excuses. And I think we as a council can be courageous and continue to fight for tenants.
All right, council colleagues. I mean, everyone knows me as a man of few words. But in this instance, I have many. I've intently listened to all sides on this. I've heard you. I've heard the community. I think that, we've seen the urgency to prevent evictions. We've seen the pandemic-related rent supports. There's questions around the legality of the current proposal. I mean, it's been debated back and forth. And the question of whether or not this belongs in our purview as a city, or if this is something that that requires New York State action. And I've heard many more challenges. I won't repeat everything that we've heard in the last week and in the last couple of weeks for that matter, but all of which present the very real challenges the Rochester rental market faces. All of these pieces, for me, weigh heavy and should weigh heavy on all of us. And I want to be very clear that in a city where the majority of our citizens are renters, that I believe very strongly we need to figure out how to codify tenants' rights, and we need to be advocates for them. But I also believe we as a council, in partnership with the city administration, have an obligation to come forward with new investments, strategies, and policies to improve housing quality in the city of Rochester. Access to quality housing is the fundamental right of every citizen, no matter what zip code you live in. And we must overcome the challenges we face, from code enforcement related concerns to issues related to the C of O process, from income issues or subsidy concerns. We've heard all of these things in the last couple of weeks. To the reality that we do have a large number of slumlord investors that saturate the Rochester market. And it's been proven by looking at the data and looking at the Rochester rental market study. So we have challenges across the board, undeniably so. So what I'm encouraged by is that all of these conversations have led us to this moment where we have acknowledged that we have a problem. And it seems to be a universally acknowledged problem on all sides of the debate. Sitting through last week's hearing, tonight speak to council as we receive dozens and dozens of additional emails and correspondence on the subject. And even now, as I listen to all of you, my council colleagues, we actually have demonstrated that there's some level of agreement across the community about the challenges, the conditions, the quality of housing. And through this conversation, we've identified Rochester's housing reality. And there is also agreement from the data, from these studies, that there actually are a lot of recommendations that I believe from Rochester specific data and Rochester specific reports that we can move forward with. So I urge all of us, Councilmember Smith and I sit on the Rochester Housing Quality Task Force that was put together by the mayor. That task force is charged with delivering recommendations to both the administration and this body, this council. And when Mayor Evans put that task force together, I had conversations with him, and I genuinely believe that there are desires to produce real results, not fluff, from this task force. And I think we need to revisit that statement that I just made as we near the end of the completion in about 90 days. We also have Rochester Housing Court that has not been enacted. And I think we need to really lean into some of these challenges. There's a lot of balls in the air, a lot of irons in the fire. And clearly we've done a good job identifying the challenges, but apparently from all of our conversations, we have not yet agreed on what are the solutions. So I just want to say this, before Introductory 94 was submitted, I thought the task force would be afforded more time. And I know that there's urgency out there. However, this introductory being rushed through so swiftly was not strategic or process oriented. Regardless of how the vote lands tonight, I implore all of us on council to work with me to correct longstanding housing challenges in our community. The vote on this measure tonight doesn't change the reality before us. We have to solve this problem. So before we move forward with the vote, I'd like to thank my colleagues for the good that has come from this process. We have opened up feedback and dialogue from public around housing policy that we haven't seen, at least in the time that I've been on council. And I, for one, am here for the opportunity to get results and change the outcomes for those who so desperately want quality, affordable, stable housing in our community. And so I'll continue to outline an engagement process, and I'll continue to support the work of the task force. I will keep all options open. We will continue our conversations, closely monitoring what's happening in Albany. And I'm committed to submitting a letter to the state delegation related to housing policy in the coming days. So with that, I think everyone has had a chance to weigh in on the matter, and I would like to ask the clerk to call the roll.
Council President Melendez, there needs to be a motion and second first.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Corporation Counsel Kingsley. Could you clarify the motion in a second that needs to be had on the floor?
There needs to be a motion to adopt the ordinance as it stands before council. The ordinance number, I don't have it right in front of me, I'm sorry.
It's introductory number.
Introductory number
94
94.
as amended.
So can I get a motion for that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, as amended, though, where did the amendment come from? That's what somebody just said, as amended.
Committee, the amendment was made in committee.
Yeah, committee
Oh,
meeting last week.
I'm sorry, point of order. Did you vote on the table?
Yes, you
Yes.
did.
Okay.
All right, so I had a motion and a second. Is that correct? Who seconded?
Yes, that's
I did,
correct.
second.
All right, thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Roll
The roll
call.
call vote. Are we ready?
Madam Clerk.
Just point of order. It doesn't have to be a member of the committee to move in second, correct?
No,
Corporate
it does
counsel.
not.
Okay.
Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Okay, Councilmember Gruber,
No.
Councilmember Harris.
No.
Councilmember Lightfoot,
No.
Councilmember Martin,
Yes.
Councilmember Patterson,
No.
Councilmember Pio,
No.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Vice President Lupian,
Absolutely.
President Melendez.
No, motion fails.
Motion fails 3-6 with council members Gruber, Harris, Lightfoot, Patterson, Pio, and President Melendez voting no. The clerk will enter that vote into the record.
Councilmember Pio, the
President.
yes, Mayor Evans.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going to be extremely brief. As you know, it's been a very tough week for us at the city, losing 2 employees. I just want to say that I've been listening to the conversation. It's been duly noted. As you know, Mr. President, as you have said, we've put together this housing quality task force with so many members, both advocates as well as people who work in the housing space, along with 2 council members and other community members. And I want you to know, and I want all of you to know, that the administration is fully committed to making sure that we enact long-lasting, sustainable housing policy. I've heard code enforcement come up every time. It came up when I took my senior management team on a tour around the city. One of the things that they talked about was code enforcement. And I'm sure that there will be other themes that will come out of the Housing Quality Task Force after they're done, after those 90 business days. And I just want to let this council know, as well as the broader community, that we are committed to enacting transformational housing change that will make a difference for everyone in Rochester. And just to make everyone go back down memory lane, if you remember, we had conversations around lead paint and lead in Rochester, and Rochester was able to lead the way in the area of lead. And we have people now that come from all over the country to figure out what we did. And I believe that by working collaboratively, by not talking past each other, but sitting with each other, which is what the Housing Quality Task Force is doing, we will be able to do the same thing again. You have my commitment there. And I think we've demonstrated that it's going to be collaborative by the fact that you have advocates as well as council members sitting at that table. So I look forward to reporting back on that soon, and reporting and hearing from the council as the Housing Quality Task Force as they go throughout that process. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Pio, the Parks and Public Works Committee report, please.
All right, to the council, the Parks and Public Works Committee recommends for adoption the following entitled legislation. Introductory number 95, appropriating American Rescue Plan Act funds for the Rundell Memorial Library exterior building envelope repairs. Introductory number 96, appropriating American Rescue Plan Act funds for the Erie Harbor Enhancements Phase 2 project. Introductory number 97, bond ordinance of the City of Rochester, New York, authorizing the issuance of $1.25 million bonds of said city to finance the cost of the Erie Harbor Enhancements Phase 2 project. Introductory number 98, appropriating American Rescue Plan Act funds for the 2022 annual parking garage repair and reconstruction project. Introductory number 99, appropriating American Rescue Plan Act funds for the Durand Eastman Beach Site Improvements Project. Introductory number 100, appropriating American Rescue Plan Act funds for the Genesee Firehouse HVAC upgrades and window replacement project. Introductory number 101, appropriating American Rescue Plan Act funds for the Maplewood Nature Center. Introductory number 102, bond ordinance of the City of Rochester, New York, authorizing the issuance of $4,503,000 bonds of said city to finance the milling and resurfacing project on Chestnut Street, East Broad Street to East Main Street, East Avenue, East Main Street to Alexander Street, and North Goodman Street, Peck Street to Bay Street, and Clifford Avenue to City Line. Introductory number 103, bond ordinance of the City of Rochester, New York, authorizing the issuance of $233,000 bonds of said city to finance water service improvements associated with the milling and resurfacing project on Chestnut Street, East Broad Street to East Main Street, East Avenue, East Main Street to Alexander Street, and North Goodman Street, Peck Street to Bay Street, and Clifford Ave to City Line. Introductory number 104, authorizing agreement for the milling and resurfacing project on Chestnut Street, East Broad Street to East Main Street, East Avenue, East Main Street to Alexander Street, and North Goodman Street, Peck Street to Bay Street, and Clifford Avenue to City Line. Introductory number 105, authorizing agreements relating to the construction and maintenance of Resiliency and Economic Development Initiative projects. Introductory number 107, authorizing agreements, appropriating funds, and amending the 2021-22 budget for the Cemeteries Records Management Project. The Park and Public Works Committee recommends for consideration the following entitled legislation. Introductory number 106, amending the official map by abandoning a portion of the Chase Street right-of-way. These were respectfully submitted by council members Mitch Gruber, Willie J. Lightfoot, Mary Lupian, Miguel A. Melendez Jr., and myself, Councilman Jose Pio.
Thank you, Councilmember Pio. Quite the report this month. That report will be received and filed and published, and we'll proceed with the vote. Introductory number 95 is legislation appropriating ARPA funds for the Rundell Memorial Library exterior building envelope repairs. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion carries.
Clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 96 is legislation appropriating ARPA funds for the Erie Harbor Enhancements Phase 2 project. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. The motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 97 is a bond ordinance authorizing $1,250,000 bonds to finance the Erie Harbor Enhancements Phase 2 project. This requires a roll call.
Councilmember Gruber,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Lightfoot,
Yes.
Councilmember Martin,
Yes.
Councilmember Patterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Pio,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Vice President Lupian,
Yes.
President Melendez.
Yes. Motion carries.
Clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 98 is legislation appropriating ARPA funds for the 2022 annual parking garage repair and reconstruction project. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 99 is legislation appropriating ARPA funds for the Durand Eastman Beach Site Improvements Project. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 100 is legislation appropriating ARPA funds for the Genesee Firehouse HVAC upgrades and window replacement project. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 101 is legislation appropriating ARPA funds for the Maplewood Nature Center. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 102 is a bond ordinance authorizing $4,503,000 in bonds to finance the milling and resurfacing project on Chestnut Street, East Avenue, and North Goodman Street. This requires a roll call.
Councilmember Gruber,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Lightfoot,
Yes.
Councilmember Martin,
Yes.
Councilmember Patterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Peel,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Vice President Lupian. Vice President Lupian,
Yes.
President Melendez.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 103 is a bond ordinance authorizing $233,000 in bonds to finance water services improvements associated with the milling and resurfacing project on Chestnut Street, East Avenue, and North Goodman Street. This also requires a roll call.
Councilmember Gruber,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Lightfoot,
Yes.
Councilmember Martin,
Yes.
Councilmember Patterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Peel,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Vice President Lupian,
Yes.
President Melendez.
Yes. Motion carries.
Clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 104 is legislation authorizing an agreement for the milling and resurface project on Chestnut Street, East Avenue, and North Goodman Street. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. The motion carries.
Clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 105 is legislation authorizing agreements related to the construction and maintenance of resiliency and economic development initiative projects. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. The motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 106 is legislation amending the official map by abandoning a portion of the Chase Street right-of-way. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
President
You're on mute.
Melendez, I'd have to abstain from the vote.
Me as well.
Thank you, noted. Motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 702 into the record with Councilmember Harris and Vice President Lupian abstaining.
Introductory number 107 is legislation authorizing agreements, appropriating funds, and amending the 2021-22 budget for the Cemeteries Records Management Project. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Now the Public Safety Committee report. The Public Safety Committee recommends adoption of the following entitled legislation. Introductory number 108, authorizing an agreement for the provision of prescription medication for firefighters injured on the job. Introductory number 109, authorizing an agreement for online reporting of transactions conducted at pawnbrokers, secondhand dealers, and scrapyards. Introductory number 117, amending ordinance number 2022-35 in relation to investigations case management software. The Public Safety Committee recommends the following entitled legislation to be held in committee. Introductory number 113, authorizing an agreement for bail credit card services. Respectfully submitted by myself, Miguel A. Melendez Jr., council members Mitch Gruber, Lachey D. Harris, Willie J. Lightfoot, Stanley Martin, Michael A. Patterson, I almost put you as Miguel A. Patterson, Jose Peo, Kimberly Smith, and Vice President Mary Lupian. So that report will be received, filed, and published, and we'll proceed with the vote. Introductory number 108 is legislation authorizing an agreement for firefighter prescription services. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 109 is legislation authorizing an agreement related to a retail transaction reporting system. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 117 is legislation amending ordinance 2022-35 related to investigations case management software for the PAB. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
The motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 8-1 into the record with Councilmember Lightfoot voting no.
So I'd like to thank Chief Smith and the command staff for answering our questions related to introductory number 113, which is legislation authorizing an agreement for bail credit card services. We'll continue to hold this item at the moment in committee as we're working together with the chief to potentially identify some alternative solutions. And the item will return in the April meeting should a solution not be found. So I just wanted to make that clear to council members and the public. And this concludes the Public Safety Committee's work.
Okay. The Recreation and Human Service Committee recommends for the adoption of the following entitled legislation. Introductory number 110, authorizing intermunicipal agreement with the County of Monroe to provide recreation and youth development programming. Introductory number 111, authorizing agreements and amending the 2021 to 22 budget for the spray and neutering services. This report is respectfully submitted by LaShaye D. Harris, Willie J. Lightfoot, Stanley Martin, and Vice President Mary Lupian.
I'll add for the record, I know it's not in the notes here, but that my name will be on that report as well.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you. That report will be received, filed, and published. Introductory number 110 is legislation authorizing an intermunicipal agreement with Monroe County related to recreation and youth development programming. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Both say nay. Motion carries.
Clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Introductory number 111 is legislation authorizing agreements and amending the 2021-22 budget for spay and neuter services. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
I will now read the Committee of the Whole report. The Committee of the Whole recommends for adoption the following entitled legislation. Introductory number 114, resolution confirming the appointment of the budget director. Introductory number 115, resolution confirming the appointment of the director of finance. This report is respectfully submitted by council members Mitch Gruber, LaShaye D. Harris, Willie J. Lightfoot, Stanley Martin, Michael A. Patterson, Jose Peo, Kimberly Smith, Vice President Mary Lupian, and myself, Miguel A. Melendez Jr. Now we will proceed with the vote. Introductory number 114 is a resolution confirming the appointment of the budget director. Clerk Washington, please call the roll.
I don't think we have to call the roll for this one. For the Committee of the Whole?
Yeah.
So we did it. We've been doing it for all of the council members, the commissioners who've been elected.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Gruber,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Lightfoot.
Yeah.
Councilmember Martin,
Yes.
Councilmember Patterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Pio,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Vice President Lupian,
Yes.
President Melendez.
Yes. Motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Congratulations, Director Burns. Welcome officially. I know you've been here for a few weeks already, but welcome officially. Next is introductory number 115, a resolution confirming the appointment of the Director of Finance. Clerk Washington, please call the roll.
Councilmember Gruber,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Lightfoot,
Yes.
Councilmember Martin,
Yes.
Councilmember Patterson,
Yes.
Councilmember Pio,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Vice President Lupian,
Yes.
President Melendez.
Yes. The motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
And once again, congratulations, Director Jones. I know you're a veteran here now, but really appreciate your service to the community. Is there any miscellaneous business to come before the City Council?
Yes, if I may, President Melendez, I have a correction to the report that was submitted earlier by the mayor's office.
Yes, Madam Clerk, please.
Okay. It should have been quarterly reports, loans and grants from July 2021 through December 2021. And that information will be received and filed. Thank you.
Thank you for that correction.
You're welcome.
If there's no other business, the City Council meeting is adjourned and the meeting of the Rochester Urban Renewal Agency will come to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Agent Gruber,
Here.
Agent Harris,
Here.
Agent Lightfoot.
Here.
Agent Martin,
Here.
Agent Patterson,
Here.
Agent Pio,
Here.
Agent Smith,
Here.
Agent Vice President Lupian,
Here.
Agent President Melendez.
Here.
Thank you.
Agent Patterson, the Neighborhood and Business Development Committee report, please.
Rochester Urban Renewal Agency's Neighborhood and Business Development Committee recommends for adoption the following entitled legislation: URA 2, resolution approving the Rochester Urban Renewal Agency's 2022-23 annual budget, performance measures for 2022, and performance measures report for 2021. This report is respectfully submitted by agents Mitch Gruber, Lachey D. Harris, Willie J. Lightfoot, Stanley Martin, Jose Pio, Kimberly Smith, myself, Michael A. Patterson, Vice President, Agent Vice President Mary Lupian, and President Miguel A. Melendez Jr.
Thank you, Agent Patterson. That report will be received, filed, and published, and we'll proceed with the vote. URA 2 is a resolution approving the 2021 performance report, 2022 performance measures, and the 2022-23 annual budget of the Rochester Urban Renewal Agency. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. The motion carries.
The clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 9-0 into the record.
Is there any miscellaneous business to come before the Rochester Urban Renewal Agency? If not, we are